Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Yeah, we're still in the kitchen, but hopefully for not too long. Hopefully. Anyway, today I want to take another visit to one of the most common phrases you hear get tossed around in the fandom. You don't need a fursuit to be a furry. And it's true, I firmly believe that you don't need one to be an active member of this fandom, but I will say that that phrase is a bit incomplete. I think it's missing a very important piece that furries tend to hide for some reason. To me, the full version of that phrase is, you don't need a fursuit to be a furry, but it sure as hell helps. Of course, there are numerous ways that fursuits really help enhance the experience of being a furry. One of the more common examples that furries like to give is that fursuits allow you to really buy into the idea of acting as your persona or character in the context of the furry fandom. And again, I agree with that, but only to a certain extent, because when you look at that idea, the idea of acting as your persona, the fursuit isn't really doing that. It's you that's doing that. And because you are doing that, the idea of playing your character in the context of the fandom can certainly be enhanced by having a fursuit, but it's by no means a requirement. And that's what we're going to go over today, how to act as your persona without the crutch of having a fursuit, and why, even though it can be a little bit more work, you can be a part of the real underlying magic of fursuits without ever having to put a brightly colored fuzzy carpet on at all. Let me explain. Now, before we get too deep into things, let's take a step back and be a little bit more specific about my thoughts on fursuits, because even though I just called them a crutch, that's probably being a little too harsh. I don't want to discount the power that these suits have in bridging the gap between the fantasy world of anthropomorphic animals and the reality of us just being regular old humans. These things really do allow our personas to come to life and give furries the closest representation of what things would be like if we were all actually anthropomorphic animal versions of ourselves. And that's just a very high-level perspective. We've actually talked at length on this channel about what fursuits allow the wearer to achieve. Whether it's as simple as putting smiles on people's faces or giving them a safe space to feel more comfortable being their true selves, the layers of support that these things provide for the community at large and the individuals who make, own, and interact with them individually are essentially limitless. So I don't want to say that fursuits don't do anything. I'm just saying that they don't do everything. In fact, for them to be truly effective in the fandom, the person wearing them really has to do most of the work in providing that fursuit a character underneath it. Which makes sense, right? At the end of the day, a fursuit is an inanimate piece of art that can be admired on its own, but doesn't do anything on its own outside of that. It's the person that acts inside of them that really brings them to life and makes them so special, meaning it's on the wearer to bring out the magic that lies otherwise dormant in the suit itself. This is also why just buying a fursuit doesn't guarantee that you'll find a sense of community or even make friends in this fandom. If you get a brand new fursuit and go to a con with it and just stand in the corner waiting for people to come and interact with you, no matter how expensive the suit is or how famous the maker is, the chances of coming out of that experience with any meaningful connections is very low. In all honesty, cons are just too busy and there are just too many fursuits in circulation to guarantee that anymore. All of this is to say that the fursuit doesn't generate magic on its own. It's you, the individual portraying the character, who does most of that work. Though this is actually good news for you, because you could still get to the core of the magic of acting out an anthropomorphic animal character without the suit at all. And I know this may sound a little counterintuitive, but if you spend enough time in this fandom, you can instantly recognize those who are really good at playing up their character's personality. And again, since that's what makes up the bulk of being in the headspace of everyone being anthro-animal versions of themselves, just those people presenting themselves in that way is enough for them to engage with and interact with people online and at places like cons, and allows for them to amass a wide group of friends in the community as well. And at the end of the day, that's what most people want out of this fandom in the first place. So let's talk about the fundamentals of developing your skills of bringing the personality of your persona out into the real world. Now, the whole idea behind acting as your persona in the context of the furry fandom involves bringing your anthro-animal-sona's personality into the real world full of humans. And the cool thing about this is that in many cases, this doesn't require any drastic changes about how you act, unless of course your persona is that much different from who you are now. But even if that is the case, when starting to work on bringing your persona's personality out into the real world, I would start with something small. We don't have to swing for the fences here. You'd be surprised at how something small can be really effective in acting as your persona. In fact, you could start with something that you get by default with interacting with other furries, being called your persona name. The expectation of being called that and introducing yourself as that to other furries is the foundation of getting into the headspace of your persona itself. From there, you could look at incorporating other small changes, like changing the way you walk around. If your persona has a more bouncy personality, adding a little more pep in your step can signal to other people seeing you that you have a bubbly personality. Another popular choice that furries like to change about their personas is their voice. I've actually talked about this in other videos, but I don't speak like this normally when I'm in suit. This voice is very much for presenting, where my real Fursona voice has a lot more inflections, raises and lowers in tone and speed, and most importantly, includes a lot more cat noises. But the point is, starting with something small gives you one thing to focus on while you're practicing being your Fursona. And over time, you can add a few smaller changes that eventually build up into emulating everything you want other furries to know about your Fursona. Now, that may be all well and good, but you could do all of the practice in the world and get your Fursona act down perfectly, but it really doesn't mean much if you don't present it in front of people. So to reap all of the benefits of being a personality in this fandom, you actually have to present that personality in front of people in the fandom. This is important for a couple of reasons. One, to put it simply, it's just how the fandom works. You might get lucky with some really kind furries that go out of their way to do so, but a majority of people in this fandom will just ignore you if you join a space but don't do anything in it. That's just how life works. So actually applying what you've been practicing into furry spaces makes the practice actually meaningful. And it doesn't have to be just in person. This applies to online spaces as well. You could really let your furry personality shine with how you interact with people online as well, but you have to put yourself out there in those spaces to do so. Now, the cool thing about putting yourself out there, especially in places like online, is that you could see how people respond to the personality that you're portraying, and it allows you to adjust for it to become even better. For example, if you find yourself talking a little bit too much about yourself and not letting other people respond with their experiences on a topic, that's something you can adjust, try with a more balanced approach next time, and take note of that improvement. It's just like practicing any other skill. The point of practice is to get your skills as best as they can before the game or the recital or what have you. The same idea applies to presenting your furry self in the fandom. The practice is meaningless without actually applying it. In fact, when it comes to practicing your character both on your own and in real experiences with others, that is something that essentially you'll be doing for the entire time in the fandom until it becomes natural. Now, some people may think about their personas differently, but at least for me, there's no end state for me enveloping Finn's personality, because Finn is always changing and adding new aspects to himself that then I go and incorporate into how I act him out. And the cool thing about that is that you could take the fundamentals of what you've been working on while incorporating your Sona's personality into how you act inside the fandom into the world outside of the fandom as well. For instance, if your Sona is full of confidence and you've been practicing being more and more confident in social situations in the context of the furry fandom, those skills don't go away when you interact with other people. They may not call you by your Fursona name, but taking your Sona's confidence and applying it to other parts of your life becomes a pretty seamless experience. If you ask me, that's honestly the real magic behind acting as our Fursonas. Acting as these silly, fantastical, anthropomorphic animals can have real, lasting effects on how we develop as humans outside of the fandom as well. And as someone who has felt the effects of those skills transfer over to my IRL life, it's a pretty special feeling in my opinion. When looking at what our Fursonas do for us in the fandom, not only do they provide us identity as furries, but also give us a chance to perfectly shape how we want to be seen and known in the fandom itself. And I think a common mistake that furries make is thinking that they can only do that if they have a fursuit. And yes, it can be easier to do with the suit to really close that loop, but at the end of the day, all fursuits do is accentuate the furry personality that the person in the suit is already portraying. That is where the magic that we like to talk about really lives, and because it's not within fursuits themselves, it also doesn't make them a requirement to present the personality of your Fursona in front of other furries. Now, it does take some work to put yourself out there and does require some practice to really make it second nature, but combining a bunch of small traits that your Fursona has and letting other people enjoy them can lead to some incredible outcomes in this fandom. And if you think about it, interacting with the community as our anthropomorphic animal selves is exactly what being a furry is all about. All right, that's it. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one, but until then, stay wild out there. Peace.